Picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Greetings, Starfighter. You have been recruited by the Star League to defend the frontier against Zur and the Kodan Armada.
Hello everybody, it's Monday, and I hoped I'd have more to show you by now, but I haven't, and that's because I am printing this week's entry. This week's topic is being printed as we speak. I had kind of hoped to get a lot of it printed over the weekend so that I could start on it today, but there was a combination of things that I really just don't want to get into again. It was hard enough living through it without having to recount it. It was just a horrible weekend, just don't even ask. But back on track today. I've been printing all day, and there really wouldn't be anything much to show you except me running back and forth to the printer and looking at it. I'll show you this. That's a very lovely piece that printed right the first time. I've had to go back and reprint some things because I didn't put strong enough supports on them, and with the new printer it jerks up and down faster because that's the way it's programmed, or way I've got it set up to do, which means I've got to beef up my connection points to make them just a little bit fatter so that it doesn't, the constant up and down motion of them doesn't rip it from the actual thing that it's supposed to be supporting, or else you get a lot of this. This is from that actual print, but this is what basically goes up and down, and then your part is attached to the bottom of that. Well, if you have these points too thin, you want them as thin as possible so that you can snip them at the connection point and clean them off easy. But if you make them too thin, they don't adhere to the part strong enough, the actual part that you want, and that motion can jerk them loose and the part falls down in the vat and the angels cry. So that's what I'm learning on this new printer, to exactly what that new point is. I pretty much had it dialed in on the old printer, but it's like driving a car. You figure you know how to drive a car, but you're trying to learn the intricacies of this new car and the gear shift and all that. So I'll show you that part. I'll show you this part. There are two of these, and it's not what you think it is. You would look at this and you would be right to think, oh, well, no, you wouldn't, because I'm jiggling this all around. You would look at the, never mind. Okay, let's try this again for the third time. You would look at these parts and you would think, I am destined to not show you this. Somebody does not want you to see what I am printing. You could look at these and think, oh, he's making a Razor Crest, a big Razor Crest. Or, oh, he's making a Serenity. No, neither one of that is the case. But these are the parts that have printed. I've got more coming out. I will have more to show you tomorrow. What I do is I've got two basic build plates full of parts, and I print both of those out, and then I take the parts that are either malformed or not supported or didn't turn out at all, pull those separately, and then I print a third plate of what I call miscellaneous make good parts. So that's probably what I'll be doing tomorrow, so I can show you the second plate of the good parts, and from what I can see, they are pretty good. Let me show you the printer. See, this is what you'd be seeing. This is the Sonic Mega 8K, for those who have been wondering what I am printing, or what I am printing with. But there you see the parts hanging upside down, happy as a clam. I've got 2.5 hours left. It's been printing for 5 hours and 21 minutes. And that will give us enough parts to start cleaning and maybe do some assembling tomorrow while the rest of it is printing. So that's why it's so late on Monday and I haven't recorded anything. Here's another part to show you. Ooh, isn't that interesting? Doesn't mean a bloody thing until you see the rest of it. Good morning, folks. Welcome back. It's Tuesday, day 2 on the Kodan fighter. And you know, I used to try to be so coy and clever about what the build for the week was going to be. If I didn't know offhand in advance, I would say, oh, come back next week and we'll find out what we're going to build. And most of the time that's true, because I don't really have a plan for that far in advance. Unless, you know, it's a kit that's anticipated and I know it's coming out and I'm, you know, salivating at the glands for it. This hit kind of came into my lap as a gift, and a continuing gift it is. But again, being so coy about it, I know I'm going to spend the rest of the week finding the perfect audio clip to put at the beginning of the video, so it's going to spoil any sort of surprise as to what this is. If you haven't figured out by now, this is the Kodan fighter, part of the Kodan Armada from the last Starfighter. And Jeff Fink is the guy who has created this wonderful STL file and sent me a copy of it. And what I like about this project in particular is it's kind of an ongoing conversation between Jeff and I. And some other people. I mean, Jeff's not just relying on my dim-witted experience. He's got other people helping him out. He's come up with this kit, and he gave it to me to evaluate, or gave me the STL files to evaluate. And I've been downloading them and printing them. And I hit him back with a not a criticism, but a critique. Critique is different than criticism. Criticism, to me, denotes you've got something bad to say, and a critique is a good and bad appraisal. And the critique I gave him was that perhaps, just perhaps, he had too many parts. Because when you resin print something, you can resin print parts that are much more complicated than if you are certainly more intricate than if you are plastic injecting them, injecting molding them, but even more complicated than if you are printing them with an FDM printer. So I suggested, here's one example. This is one of the engines. I think I teased this the other day. This is one of the engines. It's 3 pieces, 3 ringed pieces, and an inner turbine. All well and good. But I wrote back to him, I said, you know, Jeff, if you're looking, if you want my opinion, you could print this whole engine as one piece. There's no real reason you couldn't. Certainly every resin printer out there, and quite a few FDM printers, have a build plate big enough to handle this. You could certainly print this as one piece. And it would be easier on the modeler too, because when you have all of these concentric circles and you're fitting them into each other, well, first, the more things you have to print, the more things you have to put supports on, and you can get little deviations like this when you put the supports on, and that can create gaps, ugly gaps like that. Now, I would reprint that piece anyway because of the ugliness on it, but that's just the kind of thing that can happen. This is what I was talking about yesterday, about changing the thickness and number of supports to eliminate that kind of problem. But I said, Jeff, you know, let's just print this all as one chunk and then keep the turbine separate. You could still put that inside there. The modeler still gets a sense of satisfaction. You could still run your, you could still drill your hole all the way through and run your LED into that. No problem there, because you're going to be cutting this open anyway. You can channel your wires. It's no big deal. It's okay. That was one of the suggestions. Another of the suggestions was the main cabin. It's like this main cabin comes as 2 halves. And I said, you know, Jeff, you could really print this as one piece. The printers can handle it. And he took all this in. And he got back to me really quickly with completely new set of parts. So while everything I had planned to do today, a lot of it I can't do because, like, I had planned to start building this cockpit and putting the wings on it. Well, he sent me a file of the corrected cockpit all as one piece, and I would much rather use that than this. So I'm going to be printing that, which is going to put me another day behind on some of these parts, but I don't mind. Like I said, it's not a race. I'm not in a hurry to finish this. I'd rather get it good than quick, but it is allowing me to do some pretty neat experimenting. And one of the things I wanted to experiment with was using the raw resin in a cup, using the resin as an adhesive. How do you do that? Well, you take the resin, and I will show you. I tried it out on the cockpit. That's why it's one piece. Basically, I held it together, took a Q-tip. Well, I'll show you. I'll just show you. I won't show you on this piece because it's already been done. Let me show you on another piece that's going to be redundant now, and then I will. Here's a piece that is now. Let me see, where's the other half of it. Here's a piece that is now redundant. Yeah, this piece is redundant now because he's also sending me another version of that. So we'd say you take two pieces like this. Well, I'm just going to take a Q-tip and I'm going to butter one half of it. I'm going to do it in camera. I'm going to butter one half of it. Try to keep it away from your skin. You really should probably be using gloves when you're doing this because the resin is still not something that you ought to be intimately making contact with. So there you go. That's two halves put together. No harm, no foul. Modelers have been doing that since Og crawled out of the cave. I'm going to put, and because it's not adhesive or anything, there's no worry about it sticking prematurely. But I'm going to go ahead and put the clamp on it just to keep it in position. And I can square it up. I can make all things. I can make a brooch. I can make a pterodactyl. I can square it up and do all of that kind of stuff with it. Now you see that is. You see that that's just got a bit of the resin. I'm going to just do a little bit of gap filling, which is another great thing this is good for. You do want to keep your little cup of resin out of the window or out of direct sunlight because it is photo or UV curing. Solar curing, being in the window, will do the same thing. Now, because this is a landing gear bay, I can sop that in there because there's going to be a landing gear part that goes in there. What I like about these resins is that they're very easily sandable. More sandable than some CAs or certainly some epoxies. So we're going to say that that is joined. Now we're going to cover up my little pot of the resin and just shine the UV light on it. This is the UV light that I got with the tube of UV glue. Now this, using this resin rather than the glue, is, you know, about 1/10 of the expense of that glue because you're using just a tiny bit. That glue was in a tiny tube. It cost about $10. You ran out of it before you knew it. There was no way to stop the top of it effectively, so it ended up running out way too soon. So I was looking for a cheaper alternative to that, and I think I've hit on something using the I'm just going to run this around it for a few seconds, and this is enough to tack it in place. If I really want to set it, I would put it in my 3D part curing station. I have a wash and cure station. It's got a little turntable on it, and I can set it for a couple minutes in there. But turn the light off, and the next thing you know, those parts are bonded. They're not coming apart without considerable, and I didn't even start on this side, without considerable effort. So you have a good effective glue that is not an expensive type of glue. Once you get the light off of one of those glue sticks, you can use it to your heart's content, or if you have your own UV curing station, you can just pop it in there for a minute or two. But it sands up like a dream. Now I will tell you, the Kodan ship, because of its design nature, is a bunch of flat, faceted surfaces. That was the norm back in the era of early CG. Why make it difficult on yourself? But look at that. Seam is virtually gone. A coat of paint and that would disappear. I'm going to try it out on one of these engines. Since I am reprinting the engines even as we speak, I'm going to go ahead and get my Q-tip out and run a bead. I'm going to do this under camera. I'm going to run a bead like this. Swab it on there. Sorry, I am checking to make sure I am in camera all the time, and I just need to put a little mark on the mat to make sure that I am. So there, that's swabbed on both sides of this, and we have this piece going in, and we have this piece going in. Now we put this aside, we hold this up, and this has got a little catch on it that means it's on all the time, and you just wave this around the joint, let it seep itself in. This takes a few seconds for it to catch. It's kind of like super glue or CA, except it doesn't cure until you want it to start curing. So there's no need to jam the two parts together right away before it sets. Oop. That one didn't, this one didn't have quite enough glue on it, so let's add some more. You gotta try to keep it off of your skin. I'll go wash my hand real quick here. But the first, because you don't, one thing you do not want to do, you do not want to cure the resin that's on your hand. It will get very warm. You want to wash that stuff off post haste. Now, like I said, I should be wearing gloves doing this. But I'm suffering for my art. No, it's still not. Okay, what did I do wrong? I must have done something wrong. Because it is not. I think what I am not doing, or what I am doing wrong, get rid of that stick, is I don't think this is getting down into the joint where, so what I'm going to do is just turn this on and set it inside here, so maybe it'll see it from the inside and cure that way. Let's do that. Maybe I'm not close enough to it. I don't mean to make this more complicated than it is. It should have worked right the first time. The back joint certainly did. Maybe I just need to slow down and take my time with it. But like I said, you could use this to tack it and then put this in one of your curing stations to give it a more overall setting, bond. There you go. See, now it's not turning. What you can also use this for, like I said, it's a tremendous gap filler. Now it's not going to build up a solid corner like a putty would, because It has no form of its own. It's a very liquid thing. So it's very good at seeping into low-lying joints and leveling out things, but you're not going to be able to like build a corner up with it if you're trying to replace sanded off detail or something. You're still better off using a putty for that. But this was designed to give me a better alternative to using CAs exclusively on these 3D printed parts. But there's, now see, I can go back in with a putty. See, here is something I'm going to bring up because I think it's important. When you see me working with a part like this, it's got divots in it and all that. That's because I'm cheap and impatient. And cheap and impatient is no way to go through life, to paraphrase Animal House. But I know that I'm replacing this part. I'm printing a whole new engine. So this is for demonstration purposes. This is for me showing you, hey, look at that. That's the look you're going for right there. This is an ugliness. This would, on my own kit, if I got a kit with a part like that, I wouldn't be happy if I got a kit with a part like that. I would make it work. I would putty it and I'd fill it in and rescribe that line. It would be a builder's issue, but certainly no worse than some resin parts I have worked with in the past. Now, if I were selling a kit like this, I would never sell it with a part like that. That's unacceptable. But I would, you know, if I got it for free, I would make do. But if I were paying for it, I certainly wouldn't accept that quality. But this is, as I said, an example to show a procedure and nothing more than that. On the parts that are my final parts that I am building this kit out of, such as these wings, these are gorgeous. These are printed without blemish. These are beautiful parts. And frankly, this cabin is a beautiful thing. I've already glued it together. It's a lovely thing. I would be using it in a heartbeat. I had planned to start using it, were it not for the fact that he sent me a one-piece version of this. So that's the only reason I was not going to. I was going to start working on this and putting the like this side turret in the back, and I was going to be doing, you know, starting these side pieces that go on. I was going to start all of that today, but no, I'm gonna wait and see what that single piece looks like before I start building. One thing I can do is to go ahead and, because even these parts here, which go right about in like that, are now part of this whole assembly is now one piece, and which is, I've got two of these printing, so I don't need these anymore. And you'll see all of that when it comes out of the printer later today. But I was going to start making these laser turrets, and the only thing I can really do today is to glue the guns in to the turrets themselves. I can go ahead and pop these guns in, and I'll do that in a minute here, but that's the only real thing where I've got all the parts that I need that I can use in one spot. I'm also looking at I'm looking at making masks for these decals instead of using the decals, because they look like just basic straight geometric shapes, no intricate outlines or anything. So I think rather than trying to prevail upon somebody to make me some homemade decals, I will just make some painted versions. But yeah, the luck of the draw. It's the luck of the draw, because all the parts that I had that I was ready to put together today happened to be superseded by the new parts that are printing. So I'm kind of back to basics. Okay, so I'm getting ready to get the parts that I am going to use. I've got them separated out from the parts that are being made redundant, and these are the parts I'm going to be using. So what I can do in the time that it's taking me to wait for the new batch to come out of the printer, is I can go ahead and glue the guns in place. The guns they're not gonna pivot or move or anything. The whole turret is designed to move. Actually, they're designed to move. Once you put them in here, they're designed to move in unison. They will be glued only to each other. So if you turn one, the other should turn at the same time. But I can go ahead and glue the guns in. Now, the guns are they were two separate files. There is a left and right gun. The difference is subtle, but once you spot it, you'll see it every time you look at it. And that is, oops. You turn the dot, or you put the barrels all facing one way, and then it becomes easier to spot. And then there's a gun that is well, let me explain it to you. Here is a left hand or a right-sided gun, and you can tell because it's flatter on this side, and then the gun goes in. You can just see the barrel is offset to the right. And then there is a left-sided gun, which is the same only with the left side. So that would make one matched pair. And then you grab another one, and then you have another matched pair. And then you look at yet a third, and that gives you a third matched pair. And here is the fourth matched pair, and here's the one that's left over, but it's also the center one, and that is the one that goes in this top mounted turret. So let's go ahead and glue these in. Now I don't need to use the fancy light show and resin method to glue these in, because there really is no seam to worry about, and it's also it's not something that has to be positioned. I mean, once they're in place, they're in place. So I can go ahead and use good old garden variety CA on those. So I'll go ahead and just grab a turret, and well, actually, you know what I need to do? I got a little bit ahead of myself, as I am prone to do. So I just need to make a quick drag over the sanding block in the area where the supports were, just to knock down those bumps that might be left over from the supports. Just a light passing. You don't want to find yourself in the one time where the gun won't sit level because you forgot to sand something, and yet you've got CA drying all around it. Okay. Now I need to make sure I rematched my sets. Set 1, set 2, set 3, set 4. Okay, here are the 4 turrets, and then the big center turret. Let me go ahead and sand that. Okay, so we're just gonna basic, no frills, drop a CA, here you go, one turret in, nice, one down. Two. These guys are slotting in perfectly. That's one thing I have noticed, though. If I am, or when I am printing something that where there are interlocking parts, I do my darndest to make sure that not only are the interlocking parts both printed on the same plate at the same time, but that they also are more or less locked to each other when I am cleaning and curing them as well, so that they all get the same amount of care and attention, so that any shrinkage or warpage or anything like that is consistent along the lines of all of both parts. Sometimes, depending on how elaborate the joint is, I will join them together before or even as it's curing. Sometimes that's you can do that, but then you run the risk of that joint itself not curing well. But I try to keep them together so that if they're both in the bath for the same amount of time, they're both in the cure chamber for the same amount of time. That way I can, if anything's going to shrink or expand, it's going to happen uniformly, one would hope. Okay, so let's see. I didn't glue the parts of the gun. I suggested this part be combined into one, and it has been, but I didn't bother reprinting it since my print of this came out just fine. I don't need it to necessarily to print another one, so keeping that as is. And yeah, okay, so now we're ready to take these and give them a good old priming. Alright, so it's late afternoon and I've got a fresh batch of parts out of the curing station. Took most of the day to print and to cure, but I want you to see some inevitable proof here. This is, again, this is the 3-part engine I talked about so many hours ago for me, but not for you. And this is the same part printed as one. I think the superiority of the one-piece part is more than obvious. And here's that same part with the turbine in it. Lovely. This just makes so much more sense. And yes, this is geared for a 1 point, I guess that's would that be a 3 mil LED or a 1.8 LED, which you can still do all of your fitting from, because and I still have a bit of alcohol on here that it needs to get dried off. You don't always get in here, yes, but you could fit that in from that side and still fish the wires out if you wanted to run it up the wing. I'm going to take a look at this thing and see whether it's in my best interest to try to put LEDs in it. It's just a question of how I would. I haven't thought enough about the mechanics of actually hiding a battery source on it, so that's what is causing me to have some hesitation about lighting it. I just hadn't thought about where the battery would go and where all of that stuff would go. I'm not wild about using the base. There's the engine bell in. I'm not wild about using batteries, and I'm not wild about using the base. And it will have to be one or the other. If I can put a battery on board, then I won't have to use the base. But if I, running power out to the wall, and if I do that, then, well, you know how it goes. But here's another case of evidence here. This was the main cockpit tub was 2 pieces, and then the little pilot station was a 3rd piece, and then here is all of that in one solid, well, not solid because it's hollow in the middle, but one factory joined part, which is still going to be just as easy to paint as the other would have been, but without that annoying seam line down through the middle of everything. And it's just stronger that way, especially when it has to hold the weight of everything, because it's, this is a symmetrical ship and you've got big heavy engines out at the end of the wings, and the more weight you have out there, the more stress it was going to call onto that joint. So better to not have that joint. But yeah, things are looking lovely now. Oh, here's the last example. This is all one piece now. Even though I've told Jeff that you don't need this. You could leave that separate. That works just fine as a separate piece. And he may end up taking that off and making that a separate piece again. But having this all as one part does make everything around it easier to work with. See, that's the kind of thing that happens when it's all one part. You lose that detail in between there. Now this is going to get a cap on there, so you're barely going to notice that, but it's that thing that you get by see, it's so much better supported on that side than it is on that side. But these are going to be made to be glued together, so I gotta make sure that's nice and loose on there so that these can turn in tandem like that. So that's the kind of stuff that we can do now that it's all one part. We're going to let this stuff set up overnight. I am running one more run tonight of the stuff that didn't quite make it on this second round. The second engine did not make it. I don't know what happened. It was not well supported, and it was a looked a bit like a transporter accident when it came out. So it was not going to work. And that's the name of the game sometimes. You take the acceptable parts out of any given run, and then you see what might need to be reprinted. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. It is Wednesday. It is the day before Thanksgiving, which means all across America, not a dang thing is being done. No one's working today. Everybody is preparing for the extended holiday weekend that is tomorrow, and Friday's a wash. Friday's always been a wash. No one works on the day after Thanksgiving unless you're in retail. But that's not the case here, dear friends. No, the Aztek Temple, we are up to our elbows in a fun build. This is turning out to be quite the fun build. We're going to be working business as usual. Now, tomorrow, I'm taking the day off. I don't care what you say. I'm going to be sitting my plump butt down on the couch, and I'll be watching the parade like a wee child. That has been my practice ever since I was a wee child, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. Watching the parade and all its cheesy goodness, and then I will be joining family for the annual feast. And we will feast. And then Friday we'll get back to work on this. So we've got plenty of time and plenty of stuff to do with that time. And right now I am working out the dimensions of the inner support for the turrets. Now, one of the two things that are gonna, actually this will be about the only feature on the Kodan ship here that's going to have any posability to it is going to be these guns. And that's because in the movie they just didn't have that many features to them. But here's the thing: resin kits. If you had to ask me what the downside of a resin kit was, I would have to tell you this: resin parts don't play well with each other. And what I mean by that is, if you have a pivot point like this and you do this too many times, it's just going to wear the part to a nub. The material itself doesn't hold up. It's not like styrene. It's not like even FDM, the filament printer plastic. You can make gears out of that kind of stuff. You can, again, this is the resin that I'm using. I know there are harder casting resins, and there are as many different types of resins as there are leaves on a tree. but that's too much brain work for me. I tend to find a resin that prints well, prints clean, prints without too many defects, and will print reliably, and then I stick with it. I use it for everything. Now, whether it's a high temperature resin or, you know, a glow in the dark resin, that doesn't, I don't think about that. I think about what's going to come out of the printer and work and be reliable and stable and keep a good shape. So I use a basic resin, no frills. The thing about that, though, the trade-off is that it will grind against itself and eventually round itself out. If you're trying to make a ball joint with it, that ball will get looser and looser over time because like I said, it will grind itself out. But the two things I can move on this ship are the guns inside of this barrel. What I need to say, let's say the barrel is held stationary at the end of the weapons pod. I can make the guns movable because that's minimal amount of contact. It's not being forced to hold a position under its own weight. So what I'm doing is I have taken some aluminum tube. Tubes are hollow, rods are solid. Aluminum tubing, and I've cut it to a length that will allow it to, you know, more or less snugly fit inside. Why don't I do this? There you go. More or less snugly fit inside this barrel. This barrel I'm using simply for the size. I am printing yet more parts only because I can. And like I said, if this was a kit I had bought and these were the parts that I had, I would simply make do with them. But I'm getting spoiled in my old age because Jeff has sent me yet newer versions of these files that have these parts separate. They have these parts separated from this, so that we're back to this thing basically. So I'm printing up a set of those now. I won't be using the joined part, but it's always going to be the same thickness, so I can use this for the thickness. And basically I'm coming up with something that looks like that, and it's just the rod inside here. I'm going to go ahead and epoxy that in into one half of it. I can go ahead and do that into one half, and then once the other part is printed, I can join the second half. So I'm just doing that. What else am I doing? I'm contemplating lighting because that's my way. So I'm going to go ahead and, before I glue the wings on the side of the tub, I'm going to run a wire through it, just like this. Leave it long on both ends. I don't know exactly the final formation of the wire of the light, what it's going to be. It's going to come out to the natural back of the engine bell here, and it's probably going to be a tiny orange chip light. I was thinking of if I used a white one, then I'd have to tint it. I already have this nice orange one, so I'm going back and forth. I'm looking at the bulbs that I have on hand because, as I've said a million times, I am lousy at planning things, so I have a tendency to just buy a bunch of bulbs and then run through that stock, and then as I get low on something, I'll buy another bunch of bulbs. I don't kind of buy them with purpose. I just kind of buy, you know, X number of each color and then use them up as I go. And I'm trying to see if I even have any of the 1.8 mil bulbs. But I'm basically going to run a wire down each wing so that I can allow for that. Here is the main cabin, now one piece, and so much better. I'm going to go ahead and glue these side pieces on because that's a low impact thing that I can go ahead and do. And by low impact, I mean no other ideas that I have in my mind right now are dependent on those. They're not in the way of anything. So I can go ahead and do that and then glue that wing in. Do that on both sides. So let's start putting some glue on some parts. We've waited long enough. Righto, little game of catch up here. I've spent some of the morning getting the wings, and I've got a little bit of the putty going around the side to kind of fill in some gaps. Gaps are going to happen even on the tightest of models. Gaps still happen, so you have to fill these in. I almost made the serious mistake that I hope you anybody else who is contemplating building this in the future does not make. And I just in my natural course of things, I almost put the wings in upside down. For some reason I had it in my head that they went up at this angle. I guess too much, like a happy face instead of a frowny face. And I caught it, and it's like, oh dear, well, that means I had to reposition a couple of these guys that I had on the sides, because I had them fitting when the wings were like this, which is a no-no. Don't do that. So glad I was able to catch that in time. So this built, of course, you see I've got wires sticking out. And on the bench here, I've got 3 LEDs burning in at 9 volts to see how long, make sure that they don't overheat and that everything is going to last and the wires don't get warm at that voltage. The reason I'm doing this is because those are some strange old LEDs. I remember just getting a weird packet of them, and they're not your standard 3-volt LEDs. So I had to experiment with a couple of different resistors to see which would look best at 9 volts. So I'm just making sure that resistor doesn't get warm or doesn't burn out prematurely or anything like that. So those are going to burn in for a while, and those are going to be the 3 big thrusters at the back. It's going to be this guy that fits in here. It's going to be that guy in the center. And this whole thing fits like this now. And the two wing thrusters are going to get that. So before I go to the trouble of boring out that hole bigger to make it fit this bigger bulb, I want to make sure that bulb is going to work. So that's why we're doing that bit. This whole central body now is, once the putty is dried and I've had a chance to sand it, it's ready for a good coat of the filler primer. I've got new weapon pods printing, and the weapon pod is the thing that these turrets go in. And I am going to once those have printed, I can work out the rest of the wing, because they go on next. And the weapon kind of sits in front like that, and then the engine pod comes out to the side comes out to the side of it like that. So kind of stuck on that. I got the bottom module attached, not glued, but it's attached, and I'm trying to figure out, I'm pondering my choices here, if I am going to possibly run either a battery, or if I run a battery, I don't think there's quite room for a 9 volt there, but maybe one of those little baby 12 volts I can put in there. So do I want to forego the landing gear, which he put a lot of work into the landing gear that you'll never ever see anything but the bottom treads of. Honestly, you could have made that the bottom file already, with those already embedded, and nobody would have been the wiser. And then there are, well, to show you, here's what the sample looked like. That there are smaller landing gear that would go there to kind of fill that in. But again, you could have printed that at just part of the pattern, and nobody would have been the wiser, because these gear don't extend. I suppose you could extend it and put it on a gear if you are going to show this off landed. I still think I'm going to put it on some sort of stand, maybe at a tilted at a jaunty angle or something. But I have to decide whether or not I'm going to try to run wiring down the base and do that, or whether I'm going to have all the switches and power source on board, so to speak. So still thinking of those ideas. Alrighty, work is progressing along. The bottom half of the turrets are glued together. The main body is out in the other room. I've put a coat of the primer sealer on. Actually, no, the filler primer on it, and everything's looking good on that. And the last replacement parts for these are just are just in the wash right now, so I can safely chuck these away. I'd like to take a second, if I could, to address what might or might not be an elephant in the room. You know, every time I build something, I say, "Oh, this is one of my favorite movies. Oh, this is something one of my top 10. This is something that from one of my all-time." And I can understand after a while people might get a bit, "Oh, there goes Lou. He's saying his stock phrase again." But I want to tell you something. Longtime viewers of or people who have viewed the videos for any amount of time that might see something on the wall, I want to show you that no, my love for The Last Starfighter is quite genuine. See that? That's the actual movie poster. That's an actual movie poster from The Last Starfighter. From back when I used to work at the theater, at a movie theater, when the movie came out. So yeah, it's a little bit faded because it has followed me everywhere since the 80s. But yes, that is a genuine one sheet, and you'll see that. I didn't just put it up for this video. That's been there since the beginning, and of course right next to the original Star Wars poster. So yeah, I hold The Last Starfighter in very high regard, and it is not a flavor of the week for me by any long shot. Not only because, hey, the little brother's name's Lewis, you gotta love that. It has 2 generations of Star Trek actors in it. It has the one, the only Meg Wiley who plays Gran. She was the original Telosian keeper in the cage. Underneath all of that makeup and the big butt head and throbbing veins, that was Gran, or the actress who would later be Gran in Last Starfighter. And as the hit beast, the Zandozan, the interstellar hit beast, that is a very young Mark Alamo. I hope I'm saying his last name right. Mark Alamo, who would later go on to become Gul Dukat, amongst many character bits he did on the various Trek shows. Never did anything on original series, but I mean, starting in Next Gen, he played the Riverboat Gambler in the poker games, amongst other characters under latex. I think the Riverboat Gambler was about the only time he played it without a prosthetic. But he would later go on to become Gul Dukat on Deep Space Nine, and that's where he got most of his notoriety. But he was the interstellar hit beast. He was the Zandozan that was searching for young Alex while his beta unit was taking over for him. So yeah, my love of Last Starfighter is quite genuine, and it goes back to the opening day. And I still, every once in a while, you might hear me say that it's going to be a sparkling day. A sparkling day. So I'm going to get the last of the pieces out of the wash, and then we are going to do some more construction. Okay, I think a good place to wrap up for today would be to get these turrets glued into the arms. Now, these are the things I just printed. It looks similar, but they are 2 pieces now, and the only reason I'm sticking them together is because of the extra bit of leverage it gives me when putting the turrets in. I am not gluing these at this point, but what I want to do is to take these turrets here, put a drop of epoxy in them, put this on the side, put a drop of epoxy in there, jam it together like that, and then let it sit. And then this will, first I need to even both of those up, and then that I will have a turret that will turn against this arm like that. As I've said, this is resin, and it will start to wear down if I do it too much, but I can't imagine over the life of this model these are gonna get turned that much. I just want to make sure that they're glued together so that when they turn in unison. So let's see, I need to pull this off, and then same thing on this other one that you can't see because it's off camera. There, move it both so that they're both up on camera. There we go. And then this one goes on there. So get a little bit of epoxy out, not too much, just a dribble or two. Just a little dribble or two. Now I've also been working on the base stands that they've been epoxied in place. They'll be cut down to size once I have discovered what jaunty angle I want to put the ship at. I will trim what happens is those are the individual little supports that go out under the engine, under the wings, that help support it because the center of gravity is such that it needs a 3-point stand. And then what I'm going to do after that is after I put them on a stand is I'll make a either by using a piece of wood or hard plastic, one unifying long strip that the 3 bases will attach to. Okay, these are joined up together. I just need to make sure that make sure that these are glued together. Come on. Glue them together. There you go. I just want to make sure that these things, once they are joined together, the glue doesn't drip on it in such a way that it locks up anything. Okay, so those two can be held together. Why is that? It's so, because it's epoxy, it is resisting being stuck to oh, I know what it is. It's the air pocket. It's the air pocket that happens when you have a closed tube and you're trying to close both sides of it off with some glue. I need to drill a relief in that. That may not be as easy a thing to say. So yeah, I need to turn the camera off because I got to hold these with both hands. Good morning, folks. It's Turkey Day. It's Thanksgiving 2021. And no, I won't be doing any work today because I'll be feasting. Well, and at least until after the feast is over. But before I took off, I had to at least piece it together in one chunk just so you can see what it looks like when everything is up on the stand and pieced together. It makes an impressive little display. I'll make sure your geometry is right, and I had to figure out what the front height of those stands was going to be. I opted for a level approach rather than the jaunty angle. I just think that having watched the bits of the film again last night, I remember them all laying out straight in formation, and I think that's a fine way to display it. So now I'm thinking about the best way to run the wiring and all that for the bulbs, and it's a shame that there is no figure for the seat, but even well, you know, you take the Blu-ray and you run it on a very big screen, and there's a couple of beauty shots, like a frame and a half each, of where the ship just fills the whole screen, and the pilot in it was a dot. I mean, it was a CG, very early CG dot. There was no detail in there at all, the pilot. So, but yeah, I think that's going to be a neat challenge to get this painted. Well, good morning, everybody. It is Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and I am still as stuffed as the turkey we had yesterday for dinner. So, moving kind of slowly today. But my goal for the day is to get the wiring done, get the lights put in here, get everything hopefully ready to the stage of a primer coat on the whole enchilada. Oh, see, I'm still talking about food. On the whole enchilada, and start mapping out the stripes that need to be painted on here, because that's going to be the big deal, is painting those stripes and then finding a good green for the basic body of the rest of the ship. That we'll be painting next week. We will be. I want to get this ready to paint. Maybe even get the white areas painted where the stripes are going to go. Have that done, because the method's going to be to map out the areas, paint the areas white where they're going to be, where the white's going to go, and then mask off that white. There's a red stripe down the center of the. There's like a white, red, white. On the main stripe. So we'll paint the whole thing white, we'll mask off the white, we'll paint the red, we'll mask off the red, and then we paint the green of the whole body. And I'm looking for a good metallic green, because yes, I know it's probably should have been painted just regular green, but the primitive CGI of the day made it look more metallic because of the reflections and whatnot. But I think this is a good opportunity to, have some fun with the color and maybe make it look metallic. I don't know if that's going to mean paint it green and then put a clear opalescent or a clear metallic over top of it, something to give it a shine, or whether I should start looking for a, I don't know, maybe even a greenish all-clad metallic color. I don't know. I probably will spend some time over the weekend investigating different paint colors from different manufacturers, whether it's a Tamiya, I see whether they make a metallic green, or, just checking out the hobby shop to see what kind of options I have. But getting it ready for that base color, that's where we're going to be doing today. So yesterday, even though it was Happy Turkey Day, I did figure out the bulbs that I want to use for the 3 engines, the 2 engines and then the one in the back. So the first thing I need to do is get those soldered up and wired in place. And then the whole thing will come down, all the wiring will come down to this base piece and run out the back of that, and I'll worry about hooking a switch and a adapter up to that. So yeah, let's get started. You can see now how I've got kind of the area marked out, but it has to be much wider than that. So let's heat up the soldering iron and get the LEDs in first. Okay, I need to do a little bit of thinking on my feet here, a little bit of scratch building, because I've got the first bulb in, got it soldered and all that, but I had previously thought I was going to be using larger bulbs. I had planned on using larger bulbs, and now that I'm not, this hole is too big, and if I push that bulb in, it's just going to disappear inside. The original ones that were printed, as if I had just left them alone, they'd have been perfectly fine. They have a nice, much smaller size. That is the size I have made them, and I don't wish to go out and print anything again. So what I'm going to do is just make a little donut-shaped insert to go in there that is smaller, and that will allow the smaller bulb to live there comfortably. And I'm looking around as I'm speaking about, casting my eyes about the workbench here and seeing if I've got anything that is about that size that I could pop in that hole. And of course my go-to is the googly eye. And now looking at this other engine here, that big size googly eye would be a nice thing to use, and all I would need to do would be to cut a slit in there, just cut that out, a little smaller hole there, and Yeah, I think that's gonna work. I'll try something and if it works, I'll get back to you. If not, we'll try something else. Good news, looks like the googly eye is gonna work just fine. I just cut the lens off of it, pop it over top of that. It's a nice, safe, simple geometric shape that doesn't fight the rest of these nice, simple, basic geometric shapes. So I'm gonna put a little spot of epoxy over that. I don't want to use the CA because of what it might do. Now, I know it's going to, actually, you know, I should just go ahead and CA it. I should just go ahead and do that because it's going to get paint over it anyway. I don't think it's going to, well, let's find out. It's since the bulb is piercing through it, it's going to have a little glow of its own. Let's grab some glue and pop that right on the. Is any of this in camera? Yes, I'm working from a different angle this morning, so I have to check to make sure the thing I'm looking at is in camera. So there we go. Well, if it stayed on, that would be a neat trick. Okay. Let's make sure that that is coming out of the top as it should. And then we'll pull the wiring back down into that hole. Let's see what that's going to look like here. There you go. Well, let me go answer the phone. Okay, of course the wires are still way long, and we've got lots of light blocking to do, particularly on that engine. But that's the three engines lit up. So now let's just neaten everything. Alrighty, I've been to the stage now where I had to start painting some things, and only because things like this barrel or the back of the hull here where the rear engine resides, if I don't paint that now, I'll never get paint into it. So that's kind of where we're at this point. So while I had the gunmetal paint out, I went ahead and just put a base coat on stuff like the guns, and here's a minute. I'll take a minute out about these guns. You can very easily light these, and if you were to do that, you would put a little SM LED in here. There's enough room in that barrel to drill it out. It does not come that way natively, but you could drill it out easily enough and run the wiring down and through, because the ship is hollow enough to do that. And it would be fun to put that on a little momentary button on the base so that you could, hit the pew pew button and make the lasers light up. I opted not to do that for one basic reason, and that is I am out of tiny red lights. I used them all up on my spinner kit, and I haven't restocked them since. So if you don't have 8 of them, that's the thing. I may have 1 or 2 left. I don't have 8 matching SM LEDs to do all 8 guns, plus the one that's on the top turret, plus this guy. So I opted not to do that. Luckily, I have all of the files if I want to print another version of this, and maybe even print it larger. You never know. That's the thing about 3D printed kits. You could print them any size you want. You size them up, you size them down, you print them round and round, but you just need to make sure that you are printing all of your parts at the same scale. You don't want to have find out later that you printed something too large or too small. So that's the real reason behind that. I could easily have even lit these guys up if I wanted to, but I didn't, so I didn't. And there goes the phone again. Okay, now we've got all of the lights in, and I've shortened the wiring down and actually glued this bit in, so this is now steady and secure. silvered in the inside back of the, and the fact that that's blowing out like that is good. That's something that I want to see. The bottom part here, this bottom pod, looking back at the movie again, these fronts, sometimes they're red, sometimes they're white, but I treat those as headlights. And I think what I want to do is, I've got room. I want to go ahead and put a, see if there's room for a strip light in there, but if not, I can put a couple of little side-by-side, one and an 1/8 mil or 3 mil, I guess these are what these are called. And put a couple lights in the front, so all of these lights are shining out the back right now. So I want to have something that's a little more balanced, have something shining out the front, and I can use a red gel and put it in there, and some white bulbs, which I still seem to have plenty of. Okay, there's just a couple more things we can do this week to get the Kodan fighter up on its base, so to speak, and that is to join up. I've lit these little guys, and that took all day. That was a lot more complicated than I thought it was going to be to get bulbs up in there, but we do. And I've got the wire running down the base now, and really the next thing to do is to join this chunk to these wires here, push it all together like that, and then that will finish all of the wiring, and it will be ready for a single unifying clear coat, or not clear coat, that's stupid. It's been one of those weeks, kids. A filler coat, a primer filler coat. I will block off these areas that I had to paint, but everything else can get the nice filler coat. But I need to do this one last joining of wires before we can do that. So say a Hail Mary for me, and I will try to get all of these joined up. Okay, this is where we're going to end it for the week. We've got our full lit engines in the back. We've got our headlights up front. Those are nice and bright. And that's it for lighting. So I'm going to do a little bit of masking, and then we will be able to do a little bit of masking. Then we'll be able to put a coat of filler over all this to get it all one nice light gray color. And then, of course, these pieces, these turbine pieces, will get put in place after the engines are painted. I want to be able to keep those nice and clean and keep those that color. But here you go. Now I also have to build a base, and the base is going to have the other two, because this is very front heavy. It's going to have the other two supports that go on sides of the engines. So for right now, it's best to leave it up on its guns like that. That's probably the most stable way to hold it for right now. So there you go. Let's go see if I can get a coat of primer on this. Okay, so we are exactly at the end of the week where I want it to be. We've got this with one consistent color of filler primer coat on it, and we're going to let this dry all weekend long, and then we're going to come back to it Monday and start painting. First we've got to lay out the stripes, and then we've got to settle on a good green. Now this weekend, make it my duty, even though it's shopping nightmare out there, I'm going to go hit some local shops and see if I can find the right color of green for this. So if I never come back, I will be another one of the dusky casualties of Christmas early shopping. So, but here we go. This is exactly where I would like to finish up. So I'm running a little bit late, but better late than not getting done. Well, that's a good place as any to finish up for the first week. Weird week that it was. Started off kind of a day behind anyway, because I didn't get the final parts. I didn't have those as early as I might have liked if I was starting out. But I definitely think the revised parts that Jeff has provided are much superior to the original parts. So that was a delay well worth it. And then, of course, yesterday being Thanksgiving, that day was a wash as well. So for a shortened week, we got a week's worth of work done. So next week we'll be painting. It's all about painting next week and putting it on a nice base. So until then, y'all be good to each other. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And we'll see you here next week, where we will continue the fight against Zur and the Kodan Armada.